6 Japanese fighters circle like sharks, patient, predatory. The crew braces for the killing shot. Then the pilot does something insane. He cuts the throttles, the aircraft shudders, slows, nearly stalls. The enemy fighters scream past, overshooting, their formation breaking apart in confusion. What happens next will save hundreds of lives and rewrite the rules of aerial combat. But today, June 1943, it is simply a desperate gamble by a man everyone calls the Bookworm. New Guinea, 1943. The sky above the Pacific is not romantic. It is a furnace at altitude, a meat grinder at lower levels, and a graveyard when you go down. The 5th Air Force operates from improvised airstrips carved out of jungle, flying missions that stretch fuel margins to the breaking point. If your engines fail over water, you ditch. If you ditch, the ocean swallows you. Search and rescue is a fantasy. You are alone. The Japanese control vast stretches of ocean and island chains. Their Zero fighters are faster, more agile, and flown by pilots who have been training since they were children. American bomber crews are losing aircraft at rates that keep intelligence officers awake at night. The mathematics are simple and brutal. Every sortie costs machines and men. Replacements arrive weekly, fresh from stateside training, undertrained and overconfident. Some last 3 missions, some last 1. Into this grinding machinery of attrition steps Captain Jay Zeamer Jr. He does not look like a warrior, tall and thin, with wire-rimmed glasses that fog in the humidity of the South Pacific. A civil engineering graduate from MIT who speaks in careful, measured sentences, as if every word has been checked for structural integrity before being released into the world. His crewmates call him Jay behind his back. Some call him the Professor. Most call him the Bookworm. Zeamer reads obsessively, while other pilots play cards, write letters home, or drink themselves into temporary oblivion. He sits alone in the corner of the barracks with technical manuals spread across his bunk. He studies after-action reports. He reads translated Japanese flight doctrine. He sketches diagrams in the margins, calculating angles and speeds and energy states. He asks questions that irritate his commanding officers. Why do we always fight on their terms? What if we stopped trying to outrun them? He does not fit. Fighter pilots are supposed to be cocky, instinctive, aggressive. They are supposed to trust their gut, react without thinking, embrace risk. Zeamer is none of these things. He calculates, he hesitates, he second-guesses every decision. This makes him dangerous in the eyes of his superiors, not dangerous to the enemy. He is reassigned repeatedly, shuffled between squadrons like a spare part nobody wants to install. He flies co-pilot missions, fills in when someone is sick, racks up hours without ever commanding his own crew. It is a quiet form of exile. The military is full of men like him, competent enough to keep around, too strange to promote. Then something shifts. Zeamer stops waiting for assignments and starts volunteering for missions nobody else will touch. Reconnaissance flights, long-range solo runs, deep into Japanese-held territory with outdated aircraft and skeleton crews. Photo mapping, intelligence gathering. The missions where you come back with data or you do not come back at all. He assembles a crew, not the best men available. The leftovers, the misfits, a bombardier with malaria scars who shakes during the worst attacks, a navigator who once crash-landed in the ocean and swam 5 miles to shore before being rescued, a gunner who refused a direct order and got busted down in rank, men who have been cycled out, overlooked, written off by the system. They trust Zeamer because he does not waste their lives on bravado. He strips down a beaten B-25 Mitchell bomber that has been written off twice and should not still be flying. He reinforces the gun positions. He adds an extra forward-facing cannon. He runs fuel calculations down to the gallon, accounting for wind, altitude, temperature. He briefs his crew not with slogans or inspirational speeches, but with mathematics. If we burn fuel at this rate, we have 17 minutes over target. If we take fire here, we divert here. If the engine quits, we glide this far. It is not inspiring, but it is accurate. And accuracy keeps men alive. On June 16, 1943, Zeamer and his crew are handed a mission that everyone in the operations room knows is a death sentence. Fly north to Bougainville, deep in Japanese-held territory. Photograph enemy airfields and shipping installations. Expect heavy resistance, no fighter escort, no backup, no rescue if you go down. The mission is classified as voluntary because command does not want to order men to their deaths. Zeamer accepts without hesitation. His crew agrees to go, not because they are brave, but because they trust his calculations. Jay Zeamer Jr. was born in 1918 in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. His father was a career military officer who taught discipline through silence rather than shouting. His mother played piano and read poetry aloud at the dinner table. The house smelled of pipe tobacco and old books. Conversations revolved around logic puzzles, engineering problems, and precise language. Jay learned early that precision mattered more than volume. He attended Macias High School in Maine. He was not popular. He was not bullied. He was simply invisible. He joined the debate team and the science club. He built model airplanes with obsessive attention to scale and weight distribution, spending hours adjusting wing angles and calculating lift ratios. Teachers described him as meticulous. Classmates described him as odd. He entered MIT in 1936, studied civil engineering, spent weekends at the library instead of football games. He graduated in 1940 with decent grades and no clear direction. The world was tilting toward war, but Zeamer was too tall for standard cockpit configurations and too quiet for command consideration. He enlisted anyway. He passed flight training, not at the top of his class, not at the bottom. Instructors noted his technical aptitude, but questioned his aggression. One evaluation called him hesitant under simulated combat stress. Another flagged him for overanalysis. Some pilots wore their reassignments like scars, bitter and resentful. Zeamer treated each one like a research opportunity. He studied how different squadrons operated. He noted what worked and what got people killed. He kept a notebook filled with observations, calculations, and hypotheses. His crewmates noticed something strange about him. Zeamer never panicked. When an engine caught fire over the Bismarck Sea, when flak tore a hole in the fuselage the size of a dinner plate, he would narrate the problem aloud in a calm, clinical tone, oil pressure dropping, altitude loss at 200 feet per minute, trim compensating. There was no hysteria in his voice, just data. Zeamer also noticed patterns that others missed. Japanese fighters always attacked from the same angles. Anti-aircraft fire followed predictable patterns based on altitude and speed. Enemy pilots hesitated when a bomber behaved unpredictably. He began testing small variations, flying slightly slower on approach, altering attack runs by 30 seconds, changing altitude in increments that disrupted the gunner's rhythm. Nothing dramatic, nothing that violated orders, just marginal adjustments. And his crew started coming home. The statistics were subtle but real. Zeamer's missions had lower casualty rates, fewer hits, cleaner exits. Other pilots dismissed it as luck. Zeamer dismissed it as probability. He did not boast. He kept refining. By mid-1943, Zeamer had flown more than 40 missions. He was still a captain, still overlooked, still the bookworm. But his crew was loyal in a way that transcended rank. They knew he would not waste them. He would not showboat. He would calculate their survival and execute it with precision. That loyalty would be tested on the morning of June 16th when they climbed into a battered B-25 and pointed it toward Bougainville, knowing the odds were against them, but trusting that Zeamer had already done the mathematics. The problem facing the 5th Air Force in 1943 was not just tactical, it was mathematical. American bombers were being shot down faster than they could be replaced. Japanese fighters dominated close-range engagements. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was lighter, faster in turns, and flown by pilots with years of combat experience. American doctrine relied on speed and altitude. Fly high, drop bombs, fly home. Simple. Except it was not working. Zeros climbed faster than expected. They coordinated attacks with brutal efficiency. They exploited blind spots in the bomber formations. American gunners could not track them. Fighter escorts were stretched thin across thousands of miles of ocean. Bomber crews were on their own. Intelligence officers studied after-action reports and found a grim pattern. When bombers encountered enemy fighters, survival depended on two things: luck and firepower. Maneuvering rarely helped. Bombers were too heavy, too slow. Dogfighting was suicide. So the doctrine became simple: maintain speed, stay in formation, rely on defensive guns, do not deviate. But men kept dying. Commanders tried everything. They added more guns to the aircraft. They altered flight paths. They scheduled missions at different times of day. Nothing changed the fundamental equation. A zero could outmaneuver a bomber. Period. Some pilots tried wild evasive tactics, diving, banking hard, spiraling. Most crashed or stalled out. A few survived and were grounded for recklessness. The message was clear: do not experiment, follow procedure, accept the losses. Zeamer read the reports differently. He noticed that the worst casualties occurred during the chase phase, after the bombing run, when crews were heading home. Zeros would pursue and pick them apart from behind. The bombers would try to outrun them. They could not. The fighters would sit in the tail blind spot and fire until something exploded. Every manual said the same thing: maximize throttle, get distance, pray. Zeamer saw a flaw in that logic. If you cannot outrun them, and you cannot outturn them, what is left? He started thinking about energy states. A zero at high speed has momentum. It takes time to slow down, time to adjust trajectory. If a bomber suddenly decelerated, the fighter would overshoot, not by much, maybe 2 or 3 seconds. But in combat, 2 seconds is an eternity. He sketched it out in his notebook. If you reduce throttle at the exact moment a Zero committed to an attack run, the fighter would shoot past. The Zero pilot would have to pull up, bleed speed, reposition. During that window, your gunners would have a clear shot at an exposed target. It was textbook physics. It was also insane. Slowing down in combat violated every instinct. Pilots are trained to equate speed with survival. Throttling down while under attack felt like surrender. Worse, it required perfect timing too early, and the Zero adjusts too late, and you take fire before you can react. The margin for error was non-existent. Zeamer pitched the idea to his squadron commander. The response was blunt and immediate. Dismissed. Slowing down would make them an easier target. It would destabilize the aircraft. It would cause a stall. The idea was filed under dangerous nonsense and forgotten. Zeamer did not argue. He simply stopped talking about it. But he did not stop thinking. Dawn comes slowly over WWII airfield. The jungle hums with insects. Ground crews move in silence, checking fuel lines and patching bullet holes with aluminum tape that will hold for maybe one more mission. Zeamer's B-25 sits at the end of the runway, older and heavier than the rest of the squadron's aircraft. It has been written off twice. It should not still be flying. The mission briefing is short. Fly north to Buka, a small island near Bougainville. Photograph Japanese airstrips and harbor installations. Return. Expected enemy contact. High. He checks the gun mounts personally, testing each one, ensuring ammunition feeds are clear. He reviews fuel calculations with his navigator one more time. He briefs the crew in his usual monotone. 17 minutes over target. If we take fire, we head east toward open water. If we lose an engine, we glide to this coordinate. Nobody asks what happens if they lose 2 engines. They already know. They take off at 0400 hours. The sky is still dark. Zeamer flies low to avoid Japanese radar coverage. The ocean below is black and featureless. Radio silence. No fighter escort. Just the drone of engines and the faint smell of hydraulic fluid leaking somewhere in the airframe. By 0600, they reach the target area. The sun rises over Buka. Zeamer climbs to photo altitude. The bombardier begins snapping images methodically. Japanese installations spread below like a blueprint. Airstrips. Fuel depots, transport ships anchored in the harbor. Then the first Zero appears. It rises from below, fast and angled, the morning sun glinting off its wings. Then another. Then 4 more, 6 in total, a full hunter group. The radio crackles. Rear gunner reports contact. Zeamer acknowledges calmly. He maintains course. The photo run is not finished. 45 seconds remaining. The Zeros circle, probing. They do not attack immediately. They are coordinated, disciplined, professional. They wait for the bomber to break formation, to panic, to run. That is when they strike. Zeamer finishes the photo run. He banks east. Full throttle. Standard procedure. The Zeros close in. Boom. The first burst of cannon fire rips through the tail section. Alarms scream. Hydraulic pressure drops. The rear gunner returns fire, but the Zero is already gone, looping back for another pass. Zeamer watches the formation carefully. He counts their spacing. He measures their approach angles. He notes their speed. They are setting up a rolling attack, one after another. Textbook. And textbook means predictable. The second Zero dives from above. Zeamer holds course. Waits. The fighter closes to 400 yards. 300. 250. Then Zeamer does what no one expects. He cuts the throttles. The bomber lurches. The airframe shudders. The Zero screams past, overshooting by a dozen yards. Suddenly exposed and vulnerable. The top gunner tracks it smoothly, firing a sustained burst. Tracers walk across the Zero's fuselage. Smoke pours from its engine. It spirals down, trailing fire. The other Zeros hesitate, confused. Bombers do not slow down. They run. This one just stopped running. Zeamer does it again. A Zero commits to a stern attack. Zeamer throttles down, drops 10 degrees of flap. The fighter overshoots. The waist gunner opens fire. Hits. The Zero breaks off trailing smoke. Now the enemy is uncertain. Their attacks become erratic, uncoordinated. They try different angles. Zeamer varies his response each time. Sometimes he slows. Sometimes he drops altitude suddenly. Sometimes he throttles up at the last second, throwing off their timing completely. It is not dogfighting. It is disruption. Calculated chaos. The Zeros burn fuel, repositioning. They overshoot repeatedly. They take fire from angles they did not anticipate. One by one, they disengage and turn back toward their base. By the time Zeamer crosses back into Allied airspace, 4 Zeros have been driven off. 2 are confirmed damaged. The bomber is shot full of holes. The hydraulics are failing. 1 engine is stuttering badly. But the crew is alive. Zeamer lands the aircraft on 1 engine with no brakes. It skids off the runway into the mud and stops. Silence. Then the hatch opens. The crew climbs out shaking. Ground crews stare. The aircraft looks like it flew through a sawmill, over 500 bullet holes. The tail section is shredded. The cockpit canopy is cracked. Blood streaks the floor. Zeamer is wounded. So is the bombardier. So is the navigator. They refused to abort. They completed the mission. They brought the photographs home. And they survived something that should have killed them all. The photographs from WWII are developed within hours. Intelligence officers spread them across a map table. The images are sharp and clear. They show airfield layouts, fuel storage locations, troop concentrations. The kind of intelligence that costs lives to obtain. But the real debriefing happens in a medical tent. Zeamer lies on a cot, bandaged and pale. A flight surgeon removes 2 bullet fragments from his legs, shrapnel from his shoulder. He is lucky to be conscious. A colonel arrives. He wants to know what happened, how a single bomber fought off 6 Zeros and made it home. Zeamer explains calmly, methodically. He describes the throttle reductions, the timing, the disruption of the enemy's energy state, the physics of it, the mathematics. The colonel listens without interrupting. When Zeamer finishes, the tent is silent. Then the colonel asks one question. Did you plan this? Zeamer nods. He has been thinking about it for months. The colonel leaves without saying whether Zeamer will be court-martialed or commended. The line between innovation and insubordination is thin. 3 days later, the answer comes. Zeamer is awarded the Medal of Honor. So is his bombardier. The rest of the crew receives Distinguished Service Crosses. The citations are dry and factual. They reference courage under fire. They do not mention the throttle technique, not officially. But pilots talk. Word spreads through the squadrons like wildfire. Zeamer's maneuver is analyzed, debated, tested in combat. Some dismiss it as a fluke. Others see the logic immediately. A few try it in actual engagements. It works. Not every time. Timing is everything. But when executed correctly, the throttle reduction creates a window, a gap, a chance. Flight instructors begin incorporating it into advanced training, not as doctrine, as an option, a tool, something to consider when speed alone is not enough. Zeamer does not fly combat missions again. His injuries are too severe. He is reassigned to stateside duty. He spends the rest of the war training pilots, teaching them to think rather than just react, to see physics in the chaos of combat. He never boasts about what he did. He never claims to have changed anything fundamental. But the men he trains carry his lesson forward. They survive situations that should have killed them. They come home. They teach others. The throttle technique becomes part of the invisible curriculum, not written in official manuals, passed down through debriefings and conversations between pilots who have seen it work. A small piece of tactical cunning in a war dominated by brute force. By the end of 1943, bomber losses in the Pacific theater begin to decline. Not dramatically, not everywhere, but the trend is measurable. Intelligence analysts attribute it to better fighter coverage, improved aircraft design, more experienced crews. Some credit goes to tactics, including one small, strange adjustment in how pilots handle close-quarters fighter attacks. It is never officially called the Zeamer maneuver. It is simply known, understood, applied. Captured Japanese pilots interrogated after the war mentioned confusion during certain engagements late in the conflict. American bombers that behaved unpredictably. Targets that suddenly slowed or changed speed at critical moments. It disrupted their attack rhythms. It created uncertainty. And in aerial combat, uncertainty kills aggression. Zeamer's mission to WWII yields more than photographs. It shifts thinking. Not policy, not doctrine, but something subtler and more profound. It plants a seed. The idea that survival is not just about firepower or raw speed. It is about timing, disruption, calculation. Other pilots begin experimenting with small variations. Throttle adjustments, altitude changes, evasive patterns that break enemy expectations. Not all of these experiments work. Some are disastrous, but enough succeed to prove the underlying principle. You do not have to be faster than your enemy. You have to be harder to predict. The 5th Air Force logs over 10,000 combat sorties in 1943. The survival rate improves by 4% compared to the previous year. 4% sounds small. It represents hundreds of lives saved, thousands of flight hours logged by crews that made it home, entire families that did not receive telegrams. Zeamer's crew, the misfits and cast-offs, become legends in their own quiet way. They do not give interviews. They do not write memoirs. But other crews know their names, know what they did. The aircraft they flew, tail number 412429, nicknamed Old 666, is scrapped after the war. Too damaged, too old. Nobody thinks to preserve it. It is melted down and turned into something else. But the lesson survives. Jay Zeamer returns to civilian life in 1945. He settles in New England, works as a civil engineer, designs bridges and water treatment systems. He marries, raises children, does not talk about the war unless asked. And even then, his answers are brief and factual. He attends a few veteran reunions over the years, shakes hands with old crewmates, smiles quietly when they retell the story of Buka, embellishing it slightly more each time. He never corrects them, never adds details. He lets the myth grow on its own. He dies in 2007 at the age of 88. His obituary mentions the Medal of Honor, mentions MIT, does not mention the throttle technique. Most people who read it do not understand what he really contributed to the war effort. But in flight schools decades later, instructors still teach energy management, still discuss unpredictability as a defensive tool, still drill pilots on the importance of timing over raw speed. The language has changed. The technology has evolved, but the principle remains the same. Zeamer's insight was not that bombers could dogfight with enemy fighters. It was that they could disrupt them. That a moment of calculated slowness could be more valuable than blind speed. That survival sometimes requires doing the opposite of what feels instinctively safe. He proved that intellect is a weapon as powerful as any gun. That curiosity can outmaneuver instinct. That a bookworm with a slide rule and a notebook full of calculations can outlast a squadron of aggressive aces. The war produced countless heroes who earned their glory through firepower or sacrifice. Zeamer earned his through physics, through patience, through the stubborn belief that mathematics could keep people alive. He never sought fame or recognition. He sought answers. And in the process, he gave his crew and hundreds of others a chance to come home. His aircraft is gone. His name fades from popular memory, but the idea endures. The idea that in war, as in life, the smartest move is not always the fastest or most aggressive. Sometimes it is the one nobody expects, the one that breaks the pattern, the one that gives you 3 seconds of advantage in a fight where 3 seconds means everything. Jay Zeamer was not a hero in the traditional sense. He did not charge enemy positions. He did not single-handedly win battles. He was a quiet man who asked uncomfortable questions and refused to accept that the way things had always been done was the only way to do them. He looked at a problem that was killing hundreds of men and said, there must be another answer. And then he found it, not through courage or aggression, but through careful observation, rigorous analysis, and the willingness to test a theory that everyone else dismissed as insane. That is the real story of the bookworm who saved hundreds of lives by doing what everyone said was impossible, by slowing down when every instinct screamed to speed up, by trusting mathematics more than fear. And somewhere in the archives of military aviation history, in footnotes and obscure technical papers, the truth survives, that on June 16, 1943, a bomber crew flew into impossible odds and came home alive because their pilot understood something fundamental about physics and warfare that nobody else had seen. The enemy expects you to run. Zeamer stopped running, and that made all the difference.